Good afternoon. This is the third weekly intuitive swimming call. So we are expecting a couple of people today. Just see if they've logged on yet. We've got Peter and Mark, who was online. Mark group a few days ago. Give them a few minutes. Now, if no one does turn up, what I'll do is I'll explain a bit more about my journey. I think that will help. I'm going to encourage people, if you do watch this, just comment. There's not a lot of interaction on the group, so I want to see if I can change that, get some feedback, get some input from you guys, find out what your swimming problems are. I had posted some questions way back when the group was first set up. I think I'll repost those. Maybe I'll put some surveys in, try and get a bit of back and forth, bit of community, maybe get some of you on these calls as well. So just give it a couple more minutes. It's Facebook Live as well. No one's watching at the moment. So yeah, waiting on Peter and Mark. Let's check. Yep. So I think if we recall, Peter last week was talking a lot about breathing problems, but actually, if you watch the call back, 20 minutes in, he came up with the fact that he realized, or there was an epiphany or an acceptance that he was afraid of the water. And that's caused the problem. That was the root cause. And I often hear a lot of symptoms of swimmers: breathing problems, panic, overwhelm, urgency. And there's always something beneath it: fighting with the water, battling, injury. There's always something beneath that symptom, problem. There's always a problem. And generally, it's a level of understanding that's missing. So for Peter, it was a fear of the water. That was the problem. So we have to understand that. We have to give him the ability to trust the water. Now, part of that is floating, but that's kind of easier said than done. And also, there's a lot more to floating than floating. And actually, floating doesn't come easy to you. Then being told to go and float won't be useful. And that's part of my coaching. It's using the things that I've learned as an Alexander Technique teacher and applying them to swimming. So there's a couple of topics. If no one does join in, I'm just going to go for it and talk about in my approach. So one aspect of it is the Alexander Technique, which is much misunderstood. And do Google it. And I think I've said this before. Whatever you Google, it's not how I teach. And I'll explain how and why that is. And the other side of things is, in terms of the balance and the course and the program, it's my journey. It's all the things I went through as someone who really struggled with swimming. I mean, from all of my life, it was always my go-to for fitness, but I couldn't figure out what was wrong, what was missing, and understanding. So I had the lessons, I had the hours and hours watching YouTube videos. So let's wait. I'm still expecting Mark and Peter. I was quite hopeful people would come back and give me some feedback on his realization. And I asked him to go to the pool and experiment. I wasn't expecting a lot of progress because this idea of floating is more difficult. And there's floating, but there's balance. Balance is floating in action. It's dynamic floating. That's how I refer to it as. And again, it's easier said than done. And we have to understand what's behind that, beneath that floating. What do you need to do to float? What do you need to not do? How do you need to be? What do you need to think about? So it's the thinking, the way you think, that I look to change with my approach to the Alexander Technique. And I use that because I use that for my journey. So I guess, okay, let's just get into it because no one's going to join. I run these every week to help you guys. That's kind of my mission, is to take away the shame and judgment and pain and frustration of swimming. If you're not going to be on these calls, I'm not going to run them. So yeah, so just do feel free to jump on or just watch them. To be honest, I'm quite happy talking about my stuff anyway, and I can always repurpose this for my YouTube channel, my podcast channel, my email sequence. If I can just help a few people, then that's good. So Alexander's technique, I just put together a little audio recording, because I do audio recordings, not video. I think with video, if you're watching me on video, you're going to be drawn into it. With audio, you don't have to do anything to listen. And listening is a really key skill for noticing, for working on your awareness. And that takes me to the Alexander technique. So for 98% of teachers, and it's great, I do, a big fan of Alexander technique. I got into it quite kind of by accident. But for most teachers, they will teach with hands-on. They'll put your hands on your head or neck or on your back, and then encourage you to change your habits, your physical habits of movement. So, and generally it's standing and sitting, because it's a day-to-day tangible task that we do, that we don't give a moment's thought to. And they bring in that awareness to your movement, to your habits. And they use physical touch, and it's a good quality touch. It's not a doing, it's not forcing, it's what we call a listening hand. So I do totally recommend it, but it's often the experience that you'll experience. You'll be taught, you'll be given that lesson, but you won't actually be able to apply it. It takes a long time, and when you start teaching, that's really when you embody it. But for my teacher is Peter Noves at the South Bank Alexander Centre in London. He teaches a change in thinking, changing your mental habits, not just your physical habits of standing and sitting or the way you sing. It's a physical habit, but it's the mental habit. And the mental habits can change through an awareness. Now, in the Alexander technique world, it's called conscious control, which is a bit, it's confusing. I don't quite know if that resonates with people. But if we use it, awareness as the driving force behind it, that's something we're all conscious of, I think. And an example would be on your mobile phone. Your awareness shrinks into that phone, and your attention, which is another facet of awareness, your attention's all fixed on that phone. So it's out of shot. It's like here. So my awareness shrinks, my attention is fixed. So all the things around me, the light coming in through the window, the noise of the laptop, the fact that no one's joined the call, the space between me and the laptop, the seat I'm on, all those things disappear when I'm on the phone. I lose myself in the phone. And my attention, the things I'm paying attention to, is just the text. And how often do you pick up your phone or your Facebook feed or your YouTube channel and you look up and you've lost half an hour, 2 hours. Now, I'd love to say as an Alexander technique teacher, that never happens. It doesn't happen that much. It doesn't happen as much as it used to. And it's something I'm more conscious of. And I'm able to, I won't admonish myself if I've done that, but I will be more conscious of, or be able to refresh, realign, become more aware. And the idea of awareness is you can expand and contract it. You physically can tell that you've contracted your awareness, and it happens unconsciously, really. As soon as you start scrolling, keep holding my phone out of shot. You're completely fixed in there, and it's not, you haven't consented to it, you've kind of just given into it. But in your day-to-day lives and in swimming, this is where we get to the thinking of swimming. You can change your awareness. So when we're floating, we might daydream, drift off. You're not learning anything if you're daydreaming. If you're swimming, you might be concentrating, focusing. It means your awareness narrows because you're really concerned with that one thing, that goal. And your attention is fixed, maybe on your arm movement, or maybe a pain, and it narrows again. So but by expanding our awareness in day-to-day activities like walking or swimming, we can learn more, we can notice more. And it's the noticing that's the tools you'll get from my coaching, because I'm using the Alexander Technique principles to expand your awareness, to make you conscious of your level of awareness and where your attention's going. So that if you're, say, focusing, concentrating, fixed on things, trying really hard, that's going to limit my learning. And so by week in, week out, the coaching sessions, or just simply by reading the online material, that's how you learn a new way to learn, essentially. And that's what the Alexander Technique is. So that's the underpinning of it all behind my coaching. But again, it's not the traditional view, which is about alignment or posture, very much a physical fix, a physical habit. So, but we are changing habits, but we're changing the mental habits. We're using awareness and your conscious control. Again, that's the term, but it's your being aware of your awareness, being conscious of your awareness, and being able to contract and expand that. And the expansion is the thing that gives you more choice, more options. And I think just to finish on that point, there's a kind of a famous phrase. It says, between stimulus and response, there's a moment. So when something happens, you react. But in between that split second, there's the moment, and it's the present moment. And that's when you can choose a different reaction. And it's the same for swimming. You're swimming, there's your arm stroke, goes in, there's a pause. Could I do the next stroke differently? You want to take a breath, panic, you're going to rush, pause. Can you make a different choice? And it's that pause, which we label as inhibition, which is part of conscious control, which is part of the Alexander Technique. So that's the sequence, that's the structure. And it's all these principles, and there's many, and they all come up. They all come up because the Alexander Technique is a day-to-day, moment-to-moment way of thinking in all aspects of your life. I've simply applied it to swimming in the way that I did. So that's a little bit on Alexander Technique. Still no Peter, still no Mark. Come on, guys. Again, you've all got the invitations. You're all welcome to jump in. So I'll probably speak for about 10 more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. I'll post it to Facebook. You're welcome to put comments on. Yeah, and if no one isn't going to, if people aren't going to attend, then I won't run them because I've got clients to help. Now, I think my journey is probably, again, we can show how I've tied in the Alexander Technique to my swimming journey. So I mentioned how all my life I wanted to be a super fit guy, and swimming was my only real option. Football really didn't. I was kind of good at football for a while. I didn't quite work out. Cycling just ended up lots of injuries. Running, I couldn't stand running. So swimming was my go-to. Weight training, I'm too skinny. It just didn't work. So swimming was my avenue, my route to fitness, particularly a six-pack. I could cardio a six-pack. And all I was interested in with my swimming was speed and being the fastest. And again, that's a very fixed way of thinking, and it's very narrow. And that narrowness for me limited my potential for learning, which is why I always talk about expanding our awareness. And there was always an urgency to my swimming, my learning, my progress. And again, that sense of that drive. We think it is helpful. We think goals are kind of good, but they tend to take over, I think. And there's a concept in the Alexander Technique called end gaining, where we're so focused on the objective that we don't notice how we get there. And I do talk about enjoying the journey, because we often skip the journey to get to the end, but it's the journey that's the important bit. And it's the moment-to-moment things. And it's the present moments. The Alexander Technique, my teacher has a phrase, a slogan, placard outside his office, teaching mindfulness since 1896 or something, which is when the Alexander Technique, or Tess Alexander came up with these concepts. I just don't mention mindfulness because it's all about candles and whale music and incense. But there is present moment, the power of the present moment. And I add that in your swimming. I added that to my swimming. To take off that urgency, to enjoy the journey, to notice every stroke in the length, rather than just trying to get to the end. It's that idea of end gaining, this Alexander technique concept. It's limiting, it's debilitating, it's restricting. So that's what we do. I add in the present moment, just thinking, to your stroke, to give you choice, to expand your awareness, to make you conscious, here and in the moment. Out of here, you're in a monologue, you're daydreaming, you're concentrating, all that self-talk, because that's the thing that's holding you back. And obviously we're just supposed to get on with it, or don't think about it, or relax, or whatever. But our mental processes are so powerful. Our mental habits are so strong. It's very hard to change. So there I am, swimming endlessly, 2 hours in the pool, breaststroke, struggling with crawl, having lessons with ex-international level swimmers, having lessons with people who are charging hundreds of pounds per session, like £400 for I think it was a group session, £250 for now I've said that wrong again, it's £250 for a group session, £400 for one-to-one, something like that. Crazy stuff, but again, great technique. And I was copying all the moves and doing everything right, but it didn't help. So technically I know what to do, I didn't know how to do it. And I think the Alexander technique is the how to apply the things we learn in a different way, rather than our conventional habitual habits, our habitual ways of thinking. I was all about trying hard and going faster, and that stopped me taking on board all the things. Or I was copying my instructor and doing exactly what he said in and out of pool. But there was things missing, which is why I'm always talking about an understanding. It was that was missing. First of all, it was a connection to the water. Then it was my movement through the water, but it was the thinking in the water as I swam. And that's how I applied my Alexander technique training to my swimming. And that's what I'm doing in this course. For you guys, for Peter, who we spoke to last week, for my other 5 clients. So what happened was that I ended up not endgaming, not trying to be the fastest, not trying to race everyone, which that was the hardest bit. I mean, not racing people next to you. It's stimulus, the judgment, the shame is so strong. But once you add in that present moment to each stroke, even if you do briefly flit into it, right, I've got to go faster, oh, it's gone, I'm back. As soon as you get into your head, oh, hang on a minute, I'm back in the present moment. And that's always available. The more you work on these principles of the Alexander technique, the more that choice, the habitual thinking versus conscious control, being in the moment, mindfulness, I hate that word, they're all available. And that means you can choose. And choice is your power. Choice is not having to do what you're told, not having to copy someone swimming, not having to look at the YouTube videos and think, oh, let's do that. You can figure out what works for your swimming and what doesn't. And that's kind of what I did. I spent 2 years in the pool, at work, once in the morning, once in the evening, 5 days a week, except for Thursday evenings, but anyway, small details. Unlearning all my habits, experimenting, finding out what was missing. First of all, I had to learn how to float. Beyond that, I had to be balanced in the water. Floating in motion, dynamic floating in action. What did I need to do? What does Peter need to do? So had Peter been on the call, I would have actually gone into more detail about that. And in fact, that's the first 4 weeks of my coaching. That's 4 weeks of reading the online material if you buy the online course, or 4 weeks of one-to-one calls, going to the pool, taking my ideas, my experiments, coming back, talking to me about it, seeing what went right, seeing what went wrong. Were you able to think in the present moment? So when you're floating, you daydream, you concentrate. No, We want you to notice, prioritize the feedback, be conscious, expand your awareness, let the learning come in. You're investigating learning through observation. Module 1, 4 weeks, job done. Ismenia, you've seen her testimonial, went on an email last week. In fact, some of you would have had it today. She came to me with swimming fears. She's swimming in the deep at sea now. Have a look at her testimonial. It worked because we developed a two-way connection with her, with the water and her body, through noticing, through that conscious control and expanding her awareness. So that's module 1. That's the floating. That's where I started experimenting. When you join my program, you won't be doing a lot of swimming. You'll be doing a lot of experimentation. And then we transition to swimming very gradually, because you're swimming, we're kicking all these habits that you've grown up with. And we want to inhibit those, which is the pause, to choose a different habit. And that's what it is. So eventually I ended up taking all the technique I'd learned, but adapting it and making it my own. So that is no longer copying someone, but noticing when my actions worked, when the stroke worked, what happened, what was good about that. And I got a flow of movement rather than just moving arms and legs, so that everything became a whole. And in fact, that's module 2, whole body movement awareness. But I guess that's for a different time. I might talk about that on the next call. I might start doing video content for my program as well. There are no videos of me swimming. Why? Well, for a start, the world does not need any more swimming videos. But specifically, if you see a picture of me swimming or video, what are you going to do? You're going to try and copy it like everyone else does. Everyone goes on YouTube, I must swim like that. You're not that person on that YouTube advert, on that YouTube video. And they're not you. And they have different agendas. They have different wishes about their swimming. You've seen them in the pool. They're very good. These kids who swim from academy, they're so purposeful and poised, and they've got so much tight and stiffness. They're really going for it. They've got so much agenda to their swimming. There's no enjoyment there, as far as I can tell. I think the enjoyment comes from the winning, the achieving, the speed. But the day-to-day, present, moment-to-moment swimming is a blur, because they're interested in that end game, that final goal. And the actual swimming is a blur. And certainly that's my experience of, I get parents phoning me up, telling me about their kids who are burnt out. They hate swimming, but they're doing it, and the pressure to keep doing it and doing it, which is mostly from the parents. The parents want them to succeed. They put a lot of money in, they put a lot of time in. They want them to be the best they can be, but there's no enjoyment. And they ask me to uncoach it, but then they tell me they can't, or they don't want to. Either the kid does, or the daughter does, or the mother does, because they're conflicted. But essentially, we all have these different role models when we see people swimming. But if you start to swim your own way, that's when the enjoyment comes. And I think that's kind of part of my program, enjoyment. So we've talked a little bit about my journey. I think the final thing was I ended up changing my swimming, swimming my own way, becoming proud of my swimming, not competing, still having a distance goal, still wanting to be fast, but they didn't override everything. And then eventually I was helping people in the pool, because as an Alexander Technique teacher, I can see the thinking behind people swimming, the stress, the anxiety, the worry, the end gaining, that sense of objectives. And instead of teaching them technique, I used to get them to start to unlearn their habits. And again, that's what led to this program. So, right, I guess that's kind of 25 minutes. It's a shame no one joined the call. Just to recap, so I think we talked a little bit about the Alexander Technique, about how my approach is that of my teachers, and it's kind of unique within the Alexander Technique world. I've emphasized the idea of expanding awareness. And I'm veering away from calling it conscious control, just because it's a bit jargony, isn't it? Expanding awareness, hopefully, you might agree. You can let me know in the comments if that resonates more. But it's that pause, that present moment, gives you the choice in your swimming and in your lives. But let's just stick with swimming. And I just explained how I used those concepts with my swimming and how that helped me transform my swimming. So instead of swimming lengths, I can swim lakes. I don't do it for the end goal. It's just a series of moments of choice. Shall I keep going? Yeah. Am I balanced? Yeah. Am I going really far? Oh, hang on, I'm back. Oh, right, okay, now I can choose again. And it's maintaining, and it's not even maintaining, it's just choosing. Right, so I'm going to choose to end the call. Well, if you do happen to stumble upon this on the Facebook group, thanks for watching. And maybe you can join next week. All right, thanks very much. Bye-bye.